Welcome to Longview, Texarkana Game Day. Man, we have one of the biggest guests we've ever had on our either one of our networks, and we have the man Sam Spiegelman with us, who many would say is the top recruiting analyst in the entire country. Appreciate you being on with us.
Man, I don't know who says that, but please introduce me because that's not exactly the feedback I get. But it's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
Man, tell me about your summer. I know you had to have been all over the place.
It's um it's I like to think that the summer it quiets down a little bit, get ready for the season, but not this summer. This summer, it feels like the events were a little bit more spread out throughout the summer, which is good. So it takes the time to soak them all in and evaluate each one, but it definitely feels like it's been nonstop this summer, and the commitments have been coming in flurries and groves, and you really can't kind of take a day off, and you miss something. Something crazy goes on. So it's just been an eventful summer, which I guess it's better than the Converse.
Yeah, saw you were at Elite 11 earlier this year. How was it?
Elite 11 is one of my favorite events each and every year. Obviously, I spend a lot of my time in Texas during the season. So obviously, quarterback is, there's always great quarterbacks year in and year out, especially the last couple of years in particular. So I always think that by the Elite 11, I have my best feel for the current recruiting class, current recruiting cycle with the quarterbacks, usually from the top on down.
So while I got you on here, can I go ahead and let you have you admit that Texas has the best football in the country?
You're gonna, it definitely. You won. You guys have won me over when I got the national job at Rivals a couple of years ago. Even when I was covering LSU recruiting and getting to go into Houston and East Texas and Dallas from time to time. I mean, you can't go wrong in Texas on a Friday night, and that's why I spend half my weekends there most of the year. So
Well, while we're on Texas, everybody's been covering the Arch Manning thing. Like, if you're a casual fan that's really not even a football fan wants to know about the Arch Manning, you covered him all the way through. Is it what you expected with the
um,
Texas commit?
you know, I think his recruitment has been so unique. And I think, about a year, a little bit more than a year in advance, you could see that Texas was, I don't want to say light years above the competition, but you saw that they were legitimate contenders for Arch, that the relationships were real. This is a kid that, take what you know about recruiting and throw it out because it doesn't apply to Arch. He just went through the process, as old school, as old fashioned as you can get, with obviously a modern twist because he is a 17-year-old kid still. And but relationships and the emphasis on football, it lined up great for Texas, and having a guy like Millie to add some youthful energy to the recruiting process, and Sark obviously with his offensive background, and Texas, booming as a business town in particular, it all kind of opened up, and I think to beat out schools like Alabama and schools like Georgia that are, those are guys that teams that you expect to be in the college football playoff each year. I think that says a lot about the direction of the program, at least the energy that they've created around Austin to get a guy like Arch that they can certainly build around moving forward, and they already have started to.
It seems like after that commitment, like the floodgates just opened. Like, yeah, like Texas is open for business again. Let's go.
Well, I mean, think about it. First of all, they were already recruiting at a high level. You're recruiting the state of Texas, so you have in your backyard. You have some of the elite talent, not only like in the country, but you have some of the best. You're talking about the top two, three, four tiers of players are among the top 300 nationally, which is it's so unique. Which is why I say I love Texas high school football. Man, there's so much talent. Um, but really, if you think about it from a 17-year-old's perspective, you want to play with the big name quarterback, and then who has a bigger name than Manning? And then these kids grew up watching Peyton and Eli, and then they know about Arch, and Arch his highlights speak for themselves. His the way he carries himself speaks for himself. So if you're an offensive lineman, if you're a pass catcher, if you're a running back, you want to be around that. And then obviously, with they're rolling on offense, and we'll see what they do on the defensive side of the ball here in the next couple of months.
Now, you covered Quinn Ewers really, really heavily. What do you think happens with this situation with Arch Manning coming in, having two former number one players in the country, both at the same position, same school, a couple of years apart in eligibility?
I think it's great. I think, I think Quinn obviously wanted to be at Texas. We know that he originally committed there, and then, things go awry, and then he thought he was making the best decision to go to Ohio State, and it didn't work out, and he's back home now. Quinn was the number one player in the country. Obviously, I think some things have been, when you leave home, it sometimes can be tougher on a kid. So I think now that he's back at Texas, you see that he's comfortable, and you see the way, Texas football is putting out highlights of him doing insane things. But what we're used to seeing him do at South Lake Carroll when he was comfortable and in his, rhythm, which is important for a quarterback. I can tell you this: when Arch was, I think he was a freshman going into his sophomore year, he asked me about Quinn. He was very curious about what he was like. That was obviously the time when Quinn was really starting to come into his own as a national name, getting compared to guys like Trevor Lawrence, and that was, I don't want to say it was ahead of the curve on Arch, but Arch was not as well known nationally as he is, today. They have a great relationship. Arch quietly has great relationships with quarterbacks all around the country. Then not just the big names like Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card, but a lot of backups and unique connections because of who he is. And I think they have a great relationship. I think Quinn is going to compete for the starting job and might just come away with it going into this season. And I think the expectation for Arch is, I don't think playing time was a critical factor in his decision. He's comfortable redshirting. I think that's actually the preference. When you're going from 2A football in Louisiana to, the Big 12, that is a swift transition. And he's going to have to get acclimated. He's going to have to get used to it. And I think a year will be good for Arch. I think he recognizes that as well.
You covered Haynes King when he was coming through, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, we all know how good Haynes King is. Give us some comparisons here with Arch coming out.
I'll say this, watching Haynes, part of the intrigue when we saw obviously the state championship run, and then obviously the year after, obviously when he was now a nationally ranked quarterback, and a lot comes with that when you're navigating all these offers and going through the recruiting process, and you also have to win games on Friday. Coming off of a state championship, there's a lot of pressure. I don't think Haynes was ever flustered by it. I thought he handled everything mature beyond his years. In terms of skill set, I think what was intriguing about Haynes and what's still intriguing about Haynes, like Arch, is the athleticism. I think sometimes he gets overlooked for the position, but as well as anyone, Haynes ran around for his life and made plays off schedule, and not just I don't want to say easier plays like dump offs and short and intermediate stuff. He can attack downfield even when that was off schedule. That was improvised play. Arch does that for all the time, and he's been doing it at a high level for since his freshman year at Newman. He doesn't have the beef up front that even Haynes had, but coming from an East Texas program, they're not used to having 4 or 5 Power 5 linemen up front. So I think the athleticism is a great comparison for the two, and neither one of them have I would say top Josh Allen-esque arm strength, Patrick Mahomes-like arm strength. But the ability to make all the same throws and to do it, with such great anticipation and accuracy and almost do it in rhythm is pretty special for both those kids.
What do you look for? I guess an interesting question for me is, what are you looking for when you're at that elite level of football, when it's the most smallest thing can make the difference from a 4 and 5 star or being the number 3 quarterback in the nation to the number 1? What are things you're looking for?
Well, I think there's a lot of 4-star kids, and each year there's I think there's the expectation is close to 32 5-stars to represent the first round picks in the NFL draft. But in terms of what kind of what separates a really great 4-star from a 5-star, a borderline 5-star, if you will, and please let me add the air quotes around all this for sure. I think the biggest thing is if a kid is a big name sophomore. Does he plateau? Is he just a really good junior and then a really good senior? Because there's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of where you want to rank people or try to give perspective to their recruitment or their development, if they have plateaued early, that is noteworthy versus someone who just continues to put in the work and continues to get better and develop. And maybe they weren't as good as a sophomore, but they really took a leap as a junior. And then by the time they were a senior, they kind of fall in line with that projection you might have seen for their game. And I think that's someone if a recruit of a high school player, you got to remember these are kids. So if kids can continue to get better, develop their bodies, develop their understanding of their positions, whether they're playing defensive back or defensive tackle, I think that's something to look for, is that mental development along with the physical development.
That's awesome. But how do you get into this? Like, I guess that's main question there, probably everybody thinks like, everybody armchair quarterback, they think they can do what you do. But like, how did it happen for you?
Man, I was, all my friends were getting jobs right out of college, and I was days away from graduating when I got a phone call from a newspaper out in the Eastern Shore of Maryland to come live by the beach and cover high school sports in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I covered kids that were going to Delaware State at the time. So not nearly the same kind of kids that we're talking about, about Haynes Kings and Hudson Cards,
Yeah.
Quinn and Arch Manning. And I found myself in New Orleans, and one thing led to another. I started covering just feature stories on Tulane commits and LSU commits, and just kind of opened. I love high school football, so just being around it, being immersed in it, it just opened up doors to, hey, can you cover the recruiting side of things? And I think recruiting, what I tell young reporters now is recruiting is you can cover it any way you want. There's no wrong way. There's no right way. It's just coverage of recruiting. It's coverage of kids. So I like to think that, I'm someone who prides myself on the relationships and doing things the right way. And, whatever integrity I can try to pry out of this profession, I try to. And, because at the end of it, you are covering kids, and these are really sensitive issues that most people don't even recognize. So, how did I get into it? I really have no idea, but I can't seem to get out of it, and I don't want to get out of
Yeah.
it. So I'll take it and enroll with it.
Yeah. Now let's get into some local East Texas football. You can't talk about East Texas football without bringing up the Lobos. It's just, they call it Beast Texas for a reason. And Longview just, not even recently, forever has been putting out top tier talent. They arguably have one of the greatest football players ever from Longview, Texas, and Trenton Williams. And man, this year, how often is it for you? You can go to IMG Academy with the stack teams, but how often is it for you to be able? We would love to have you at a Longview game this year. You have two of your top 300 guys. One of them uncommitted, I believe, commits September 22nd. One of the top players in the country. How often is it for you to get to go to a Friday game and have a couple guys on the same team?
I'm telling you, that's one of the reasons I fell in love with going to Texas is you can kind of close your eyes, and pick out a game on a Friday night, and you can find talent. And sometimes, you got to remember Jalen, he was an underclassman at one point and wasn't as well known, and then you started to hear the whispers. So sometimes being around the rise of these kids. But I'll tell you from just a personal angle, I went to the Haynes King versus Temple playoff game a couple of years when Haynes was a senior. And was the first or second round of the playoffs, one of the most electric playoff environments I have ever been to in 10 plus years of covering high school football. And that was, first or second round. But in terms of Jalen, yeah, no. I mean, Jalen and Taylor, who I got to see last year, obviously play against Denton Ryan. To just, talk about balance. Coach King is probably loving this, but Jalen Hale, in terms of his recruitment for years, we talk about you said Longview has a history, and you talk about guys like Trent Williams and Haynes King. Jalen Hale was one of these names that we heard at a national level as an underclassman, which I think is so rare for a town like Longview. And I think going into his senior year, I think, while it's a 3-team race, it's coming down to Texas and Alabama. He's coming off visits to A&M and Alabama. I like where Texas stands. I think he's become a priority for the staff, which he was really as an underclassman before. Like I said, recruitment goes in a lot of different directions. But it's cool to see Brendan Marion now back at Texas, recruiting a guy like Jalen Hale. And, Jalen has a relationship with Arch, and I think that's part of the reason why the Longhorns have surged with him.
Yeah. How do you see, so commitment September 22nd, like, give me some ideas. Like the first comment I happen to see on here is from our partners in Rockwall. It says he would like to know how Noble Johnson compares to like a Jalen Hale, the Rockwall wide receiver.
Oh yeah, and I'm a huge Noble Johnson fan. Those two receivers in particular are a little bit similar because they're both big frame, big physical wide receivers. Noble is about 6'3", 200 pounds right now. He's kind of you don't want to say he's a hybrid tight end, but he's kind of a juiced up flex, a juiced up outside receiver with big and physical work on the outside and the inside. I like to say just give him the ball, let him run over people because he's so big, it's hard to corral. And he's a jump ball specialist. He's got great range. Jalen is more polished in terms of his route running, catching the ball underneath, kind of making plays after the fact. I think Jalen is at Longview. He does it all the time. Is taking the top off of defenses. I think when we saw it at Future 50, he still has some ways to go to do that when he gets to either Texas or Alabama. And that'll, he'll work that out with his receivers coach. But right now, he does it on Friday nights. He's always ahead of the curve as a dynamic, true, wide receiver one sort of receiver.
You have an NFL player you compare his game to? Like, you've been doing it a long time. Like, who do you look back? It's like,
yeah,
I know this is Jalen Hill in high school.
I know this is kind of hard praise, but the only receiver that really comes to mind is when I first started doing this, I watched Stephon Diggs because Jalen is not 6'4" and 190 pounds. He's about 6'1", 6'2" ish, but he's still pretty. He's well built physically. He's so dynamic after the catch. Even though he isn't the biggest receiver, it has no impact on his competitiveness coming back for the football. And I really think, he has all the traits from his long stride speed, his straight line speed, his ability to get up and obviously get after and high point the football and come down with tough grabs. I think he's really just scratching the surface. I think his best football is still 2 to 3 years ahead of him.
Wow. So I guess if they're not throwing it up, what do you think about Taylor Tatum?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Taylor Tatum. I think he's a 3-down back. He's got to be Coach King's favorite to have a young back like Taylor Tatum at 5'10", 200 pounds, well built. I love that he's also a fantastic baseball player. You love the multi-sport kids, and in a place like Longview and out in East Texas, you love when they dominate on multiple Friday nights or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day of the week. You're going to hear Taylor's name. He's top 60 on three. He's a consensus top 100 kid. I think the world of him. I don't think there's anything he can't do. I think this offseason we saw that Texas and A&M have surged to the top with him. Baylor is up there as well. But I'm starting to think that A&M has gained some ground with Taylor, and they've. You think about L.J. Johnson and Devon Chain. They've gotten some of the best backs in the state the last couple of years, and they're in a good spot with Taylor, who is one of the best, if not the best, in 2024.
What if a family or kid's watching? What is the best way? Let's say you're not a top 100 guy, but what is the best way to get seen by colleges, in your opinion?
Say that again.
Let's say you're not a top 100, not a top 300 guy, Sam's not going to come watch you play football. What is the best way for a kid like that to get seen by colleges, to get recruited?
I think the first thing, and I do have these conversations with parents all the time, is you need to have an upfront and honest conversation with your head coaches, because that's directly who the college coaches are going to converse with, and when they're coming by the school during the evaluation period, or they're asking, hey, do you have any kids that we need to look at? The coaches, the parents, and the kids need to all be on the same page about what kind of level college are we expecting to be recruited by. Is there even a chance? What do we need to do? Are the grades in order? Are all my off the field things in order? And then, do we legitimately, do we have the skill to play at the next level, or is it just kind of a pipe dream? Because, it's really hard to play, Division I, Division II, Division III football. It's tremendously hard. So I think having realistic expectations and then being on the same page with your high school coaches is critical. In this way, when you go through the process, because even for top 100 kids, and then, you never hope this or wish this upon anyone, but even top 100 kids, run the risk of injury, and then run the risk of, some schools just stop recruiting, uncommittable offers at certain points. So it's a rigorous process, whether you're top 100 or top, 10,000. So having the realistic expectations and going about it with reasonable expectations is critical, in my opinion.
Sure. Appreciate the insight on that. So we got to have you out to a Longview game. We want you at a Longview home game.
Yes, sir.
We got 2 top 100 players in their classes, both ranked really highly at their position. We have a great offensive line led by Jack Norman. The Longview defense is super young. And by the way, Longview's ranked number 1 in the state. Man, Willie Nelson and Jaden Sims, Chase Smith, Buda Carrot, one of my favorite players, Darian Boone. And then we also have on defensive line Jeremiah Rugley, who holds a UTSA offer. They all want to see you there. What do we got to do to make this? What do we got to do to make this happen?
I'm all for it. We have to obviously figure out the date, but like I think I told you, it's actually easy for me to drive to East Texas coming from the boot. So I've done it before. I can do it again. I got my lovely Courtyard Marriott right down the road from Lobo Stadium. I'm a regular there from all the times I've come to visit Haynes for over the years. So I think it's time that I get back this year as well.
You don't worry about the hotel room. We got you on that. We'll take care of that. No problem. Lobo Nation wants to see you there. My people up in Texarkana want to see you too. We'll take care of your hotel there as well.
Those are great people as well. I love East Texas.
Man, speaking with that area, like Longview being ranked number 1 in the state, we know how like that fan base is just unbelievable. You mentioned the Temple game, how well they travel and like they make that atmosphere everywhere you go. I mean, it's a lot of these schools, we're seeing come up, and I'm going to use like the Frisco schools, for example. The newer schools, they're coming up, and a lot of them are really, really good, and the fan base just isn't there like a Longview High School.
Oh, it's it's a little bit cliche to talk about small schools and love for Friday nights. But when you actually see it in its reality, it kind of gives you the chills and makes you shiver a little bit. I tell you about that Temple game. I couldn't find. I get to games early. I don't get there at 7:00. And I was there an hour and a half plus before the game. I had nowhere to park. It was freezing outside. I had double jackets, double gloves. I think I sat in the stands because I wanted to film Haynes and I wanted to film Quentin Johnston on the other side. Who's obviously now a baller at TCU.
Yeah.
And just talking to the parents, the smack talking from different sides, from Temple and Longview, which are obviously great, both those programs, but also the respect at the same time. Like, it's almost storybook because you don't, if you have never seen it for the first time, I implore you to do that once in your life if you love high school football.
Was that at Waco?
No, that was at Longview.
That was that the playoff game?
Yes, sir.
I thought they played at Waco, huh?
They might have. I'm sure they have a long storied past of playing each
other. Oh, yeah. But, man, we got to have you out to that. Switching a little bit over to Texarkana, I mean, Longview just as a school has so many great players come through there. And, like, we have a list coming up. I mean, it's like it never ends almost. In Texarkana, we're a 4 high school town, a 5A, 2 4A schools, and then a school on the Arkansas side. I mean, there's a lot of talent in this area.
Quite a bit. I know that we've talked a little bit privately, before we got on the air, but Clayton Smith was a 5-star coming from this part of the area, and you talk about kids that what I said would. I saw Clayton as an underclassman work out at LSU. He was going into the 10th grade. And I talked to, his coaches over at Texas High. I went up to see him, and he was a kid that continued to get better. And by this time going into his senior year, I think I went to the opener, Longview against Argyle, and Caleb Clayton was in the stands. That season, he had an insane season with double-digit sacks. I think 30 or 40 TFL. The development from year to year, and when sometimes you talk about expectations, and when you can not only meet expectations as an analyst, but exceed them and then crush them and then obliterate them to the level that Clayton did. Yeah, that town produces quite a bit of talent and some top tier talent like Clayton.
And Clayton's one of my favorite players out of here. I mean, he in high school he looked like a professional football player.
Yes, he did. I'll never forget. I went there looking for him one day. And I think he got like teeth removed. He probably got his braces taken off and teeth, the whole dentist thing. And he was willing to come back and, to come back to practice, and coach had to beg him to stay home and relax. Like it's like, this is not normal, but that's what separates the great from the elite.
The year we started Gameday, I hope the best hasn't came and went in Texarkana, but we're sitting here, we have a Nick Martin, a Marcus Burris, Landon Jackson, you got Clayton Smith, and it's could this get? And then on top of that, I know you're not a basketball guy. We have a McDonald's High School All-American 5 minutes down the road, and Damian Collins. We're seeing all these guys have success in college, and it's just we're in a great area, for football, and it's exciting for us, obviously.
Yeah, and I'll say this, just I've as long as I've been a national analyst, and Texas has been in my backyard. East Texas has been a must, and obviously, I don't need to tell you, East Texas is huge in your area. Whether it's from Longview to Texarkana, or whether it's spending time in Tyler or Carthage, or where you name it, the town each year. There's East Texas, every single cycle produces dudes. Now, some years like the Clayton Smith and Landon and Marcus year, that was that was a cycle for the ages. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, but year in and year out, and I know that you and I have had whether it's a Jalen Hale or a Taylor Tatum, or some when Lance Jackson's turn, we have these elite national guys, top 100 sort of players. Um, it's nothing wrong with that. It's a must stop every single year for college coaches and
that's
analysts like
great.
myself.
Man, what do you think about someone like a Jalen Boardley's game coming up? Going to be a junior this year.
Yeah, he's a top 25 running back on three already. I was talking a little bit about that Argyle game that I was there for a couple of years ago, and I remember hearing about Boardley from the coaches back then. So it's funny to see him now, obviously, as a 2024. I think he's going into a big season this year. I'm a big fan of him. I think this will be a little bit of a breakout season. I mean, he's 6 foot. He's almost 200 pounds. So he's got the size. I think he's a better athlete than most people realize. I think that's what I'm saying with him having a breakout year when he has more tape showing off some of these just eye popping sort of plays that he's capable of.
Yeah.
But I love the flashes that he's shown on tape. I love the stop start quickness. He's got elite burst, and they use him all over the formation. So I think he's due to make quite a few plays this year.
Someone this early, like going into his junior year, at what point do you start looking at okay? Let's kind of break this down. Where do we think? Do you look at what's the best fit for him, or where you think he would like to go? Like, how do you start kind of
Well,
getting your?
it's unique because, like I said, I think when I first heard about Jalen, he might have been going into his freshman year or as a freshman. So, as an adult, you naturally put expectation. Hey, if a coach is telling me about a freshman, this guy, is it's gonna be Booby Miles out here, and that's not always realistic, right? And sometimes we want to see something right away, and I think patience is a virtue. So, him having the flashes as a sophomore is more realistic to now having a bigger junior campaign. A lot like Taylor. Taylor played as a freshman. He really burst onto the scene a little bit earlier than most, which is why he's a national guy. And I think Jalen can follow a similar trajectory. And those coaches know what they're doing just fine. So I have nothing to worry about over there.
Here in town we have Tracy Rebels, Victor Shaw, both committed to UTSA. Tremendous athletes. I know you know a little bit about them. We spoke privately. How did their game you think is going to come translate to college football?
Well, I'll tell you what, if UTSA has commitments from them, then they must see something. And, obviously watching them, when you talk about putting rankings on players, these are Power Five talents.
Yeah.
And with the depth of guys that you have in the state of Texas alone, it allows schools like, SMU and UTSA in particular to kind of clean up. And, UTSA cleans up out in East Texas. Vic Shaw is a big dude at 6'3" and 260 pounds. I like how he can play with his hand in the dirt, and I like how he can play from a stand-up position. He's got some really great feet, really great balance, and he's a solid tackler. I'll be curious to see how he does as a senior. And then with a guy like Tracy Rebels, I really like Tracy. Obviously, I think he needs to be a little bit more polished in pass coverage. But in terms of physicality, they play him a lot near the line of scrimmage. He is as mean as it gets at the safety
Yeah,
position.
yeah.
One of my favorite traits for a safety. He can play in the box, can play over the top. He is a straight line to the football kind of defender. So whether he grows into a linebacker, whether he's a strong safety, whether he just kind of floats around the nickel and plays near the box, like I'm a big fan of Tracy, and that's a guy I can see really thriving at UTSA.
Yeah, Tracy's game. It's great for us because he's getting highlights every play. You
Exactly.
know,
Exactly.
and if you haven't seen Vic Shaw in a while, he's lost 25, 30 pounds. He looks like a Division I football player. Not that he didn't before, but if you saw him then, saw him now, I mean, it is just has a swag to him. He's walking with confidence. He's the leader of that football team. Uh, my stock is super high on him right now.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. He pops on tape. He's got the size. If you're really trying to, sometimes recruiting boils down to 6'2" versus 6', 3.5.
Yeah.
Sometimes that 1.5 inch might really help UTSA in the long run as they rebuild that defense or rebuild up front too, because he plays both ways and shines.
Hey, speaking of size, there's a kid, I know you know who he is, Caleb Hackleman
Oh
at
yeah.
Pleasant Grove. He's about 6'30". Dude is super tall with a helmet on. I'm telling you, this kid is huge. Well, he's probably 6'6", 6'7", 6'7" maybe junior, probably for sure 6'6". Big kid, looks really good in football pads. Gonna get a lot of playing time this year. Holds a Baylor offer, tech officer, Austin Pay offer. Assuming more to come. I know he's talked to a few other coaches after talking with Coach Gibson. Um, man, he looks like the offensive lineman you want. Has the frame where you can build to it, the whole 9 yards. Are you familiar with him?
Again, Coach Gibson introduced me to Caleb when I think it was a practice, and he went out of his way to say, this is a guy, Coach Gibson. He's not going to introduce you to a player unless you need to know him. And when you see Caleb, kind of along the lines of you were saying, he's one of those first off the bus sort of dudes. And that's been the case for a couple of years already. It's 6'5" plus. He's got to be, on his way up to 300 pounds at this point with the way that they work out over at PG. Obviously, the size, you can't teach the size. In the little bits of film that we've seen, the little dosages, we've seen just a mean physical mauler. So whether he grows into a tackle or whether he plays on the inside, we'll figure that out at time. But he's someone definitely who could just explode onto the scene because you can't teach size, you can't teach physicality, and he has both of those in spades.
Yeah, I've been asked before about him. I said, well, I've seen him play, hadn't seen him play a lot, so I can't give you a real educated answer on it. But his growth over this last season, his body type has kind of changed a little bit. He's got muscles that moved up, has thinned down in the waist, and watched him at practice a couple of times this week. I mean, uh, for a high school, I would not want to be in front of that guy. He's huge.
And that's
You
what
know,
I'm
so
talking about. The development from year to year. Sometimes, you could be the biggest guy as a freshman, but if you want to play tackle, if you want to move around and be an athletic interior lineman, let them reform their body in the weight room and let's see what they do.
they do a great job with their weight program over there. Sakari Johnson. This was like going to be our story for last season. One of the best high school football players I've seen in a long time. Comes out in like first three plays of the season, 125 total yards, breaks his arm on the fourth play. And when I tell you, you saw signs of greatness real quick. I mean, it was like you couldn't believe what you were seeing, and then it was just over that quick. It was unbelievable, heartbreaking, the whole 9 yards. Everybody in Texarkana feels and knows like, hey, this Sakari kid is the top kid in the country. I don't know whether he'd play offensive side of the ball or defense when he gets to college, but we all know this kid can play football. Um, the limited film I know from sophomore year doesn't necessarily hurt him, but it doesn't doesn't help him to not have as much film. But on your outlook, what's your look on it?
Well, I think, to kind of go along with what you say, I mean, people in your neck of the woods start talking about this kid being great, being, the sky is a limit. Injuries are absolutely terrible. The silver lining is he was still just, he's still an underclassman with plenty of time to kind of get more film out there. He's probably not going to play quarterback at the next level. But when you're at PG and you're playing quarterback and that's you look around some of the players around you, it's telling that you're the playing quarterback. It's just putting the best athlete out there. So whether he's playing receiver, I know a lot of colleges prefer him at defensive back. He's 5'11", 180. You see it on the like you said before he got injured. He's got straight line speed. He can make defenders miss. You'd love to see him have kind of a healthy season. Put some good tape out there, and then this off season, put him through put him through the drill work, show what he's able to do as a defensive back, and I think that'll be the biggest emphasis. But you have him healthy for the season, and I think like how you said it, he's under center, he's playing quarterback. He just needs to kind of stay on the field, get everything back under him, and regain his form.
Yeah, I was at practice this week. I see the kids periodically, but I might go a month, two, especially in summer where I'm not up there every day or at all sometimes. And man, he is ripped up. I mean, like veins popping out where I didn't know we had veins. And it's just, the thing is with him, it's not just him. It's like, man, all these guys look like that, And so he put on great weight. I'm really, really excited for him this year. He's going to be playing both ways. And I feel like putting him at the cornerback is a good move for them. And I feel like that's probably where he's going to play in college anyway. I mean, he's such a playmaker. I feel like you have to put the ball in his hand as well.
You know what? I've covered a lot of defensive backs that were all high school quarterbacks, and that tends to be a great sign usually. I think it works on both. Whether he finds a fit. Some coaches might think that he might just be better with the ball in his hands, and some might think that he might have such a natural feel for the position, for the game, that he could do it on both ways. I'll tell you this though: if he can do it on defense, you can make a lot of money playing and snatching balls out of the air. So we'll see. And the great thing is, he's 2024. He's healthy. Like you said, he's looking great right now at a critical point in the calendar. Still has plenty of time. And I know, he's got the SMU offer. I'm sure that we'll see those start to fall in as his tape gets under him.
Yeah. TJ Gray over Texas High's coming out ranked number 10. They're going to play Frisco Lone Star in Cowboy Stadium right off the bat. You're welcome to show up with everybody. There'll be enough seating. TJ Gray at wide receiver, he holds 7 offers: Colorado, Georgia Tech, Louisiana Tech, North Texas, Pittsburgh, as well as UTSA. Seems like kind of sky's the limit on this kid. Tall kid, slim frame right now. Looks like he can grow into it fast. I don't know if I've seen him drop a pass in a game now that I'm thinking about it. The kid can ball.
Hey, like I said, in Texas, you can kind of close your eyes and reach out, and you might find a Power 5 receiver that's just kind of, hiding behind a tree in East Texas. And I think that's what you got in TJ Gray. I think we could see his recruitment really take off, middle of the season, because I kind of what you said. He's got size. He can get downfield. He's like a gazelle getting downfield. He's got a great catch radius. He's got great hands. He's an athletic big receiver. He's slight. You can go to college and you can put on weight. It's pretty easy to do. I think he could. He's just someone who's obviously he's a Power 5 talent right now, and I think that the interest can only drive up if he's having a great senior season this year.
Yeah, man, I'm really, really rooting for him. He'll have Cody Reese playing quarterback. They'll get him the ball in open field. Coach Stanford and his staff will find a way to get their playmakers the football. That's for sure. Hey, I do have one guy, all right, coming out of 8th grade, going to be a freshman this year. I got a chance to see him work out yesterday, got some pictures of him, and that's the Daquan Prevost kid. Holds 9 offers right now. I mean, we're talking Arkansas, Arkansas State, Florida Atlantic, Houston, Missouri, Tech, Penn State, SMU, UTSA, and we know like Lance last year, he had an Arkansas offer before he ever touched high school. Prevost kid has had a bunch of offers before he ever touched high school. I live in the town and I hear how great he is, but on like a national level, like when is this too young for you to start looking at a kid like this?
What he's done is he's been really phenomenal in the 7-on-7 department, which is always it's a political nightmare when you talk to high school coaches, and I understand it, and I understand both arguments for the 7-on-7. Because Prevost now has a ton of Power 5 offers that, kind of what I alluded to before, in 3 years, if he suffers an injury, cross your fingers that he does not, obviously, but if something were to happen, who can even predict, are those offers so committable? Do those colleges offer 10 more receivers, between now and then? So what it really does is it kind of, puts his name out there. We were talking about a freshman on the show, with guys that are going into their senior and junior years. I think it also kind of puts a little bit of kind of what we talked about. We talked about Bordley before. All of a sudden you start hearing this name, comes back to expectations. If you want to be a national name, it kind of has a lot of, onus on your shoulders. You're week in and week out. You could ask Haynes King about it. You can ask Jalen Hale about it. You can ask Taylor Tatum about it, because it's, being a blue chip recruit, quote unquote, comes with, the expectations. And, I'm curious to see how he does this year. 7-on-7 is great, but I think it's also a high volume activity. It's a lot harder to produce that on Friday night, especially as an underclassman. So I'm curious to see how his season goes.
Yeah, he definitely looked the part, just young, but some kids you walk out and you're like, that's a football player. You
Sure.
probably need to be playing basketball. Like he looks like a football player. You know what I mean?
Right.
But Lance Jackson, I know you know Landon. Um, I was I walked on the field Monday, or yeah, I guess Monday when they started, and I forgot he was a sophomore. I don't know why I didn't think about it. I looked down there, and I mean, it looked like a grown man was was down there with some kids, and I see him all the time. It's like I just with football helmet on, he just looks like a grown man. And being a sophomore, I don't even know 6'6", 6'7". Um, he looks as big as Landon is right now. As crazy as that sounds to say.
I'll say this. I had kind of forgotten about Lance myself until you had brought him up. And Landon was, we talk about Clayton from that area and Marcus. Those group of guys were so great. And I loved covering Landon. Man, just the sweetest giant you've ever. I still have pictures of sitting down with him in the football offices, and for being as big of a kid as he was just the sweetest dude you have ever spoken to in your entire life. The thing about Landon is obviously injuries, just completely just freakish combine times and what he was able to do, his blend of size, speed, length through the yin yang and athleticism, and the injuries obviously continued to kind of stifle him. But he's so special. And I talk about that game against Argyle, him playing tight end, him flying off the edge, moving inside and bulldozing dudes. So the combination of speed and power was relentless for Lance. And Lance, he might end up being better. I don't even know how to say that at this.
I know,
But he's bigger.
Yeah.
He shows those same traits. I always like to joke with little brothers is that because I've covered guys like Sean Preston and Chaz Preston, is the little brothers are often the best athletes. And I think it still is too early to say that for sure. But based on what we've seen from Lance and what he looks like, and we know that the DNA is really, really, really good, and he's going to do it on both sides of the ball. I think he has a chance to, Landon was a top 100 kid consensus wise, and I think Lance is in those same footsteps coming up.
Yeah, I think came out sophomore as the top 25 kid in the state of Texas via Dave Campbell magazine. Man, a lot to look forward to in this area. So we expect you to come up and see us. I mean, we'll pay for your gas, whatever it takes. You come see us.
I'm in. We'll go get po' boys right after. That sounds good with me.
All right. Well, man, hey, I really, really appreciate you taking time with us. I know you're super busy. What is life like for you since the summer camps are over and all that? Does it slow down or speed up?
It's just a different beat. I would say right now everyone is rushing to figure out when they're committing before their senior season, which is fun because it's exciting. You obviously know there's a whole other window of recruiting that's still going to follow when kids have to flip and take their OBs and stuff. But right now I'm putting together what you're talking about. I'm looking at games I want to get to, where I want to be. That last weekend of August, what scrimmages I might take in the next couple of weeks, and that's exciting for me because I try to hold off on it as long as I can. Because once I start writing it down, I'm stoked for it. It's go time.
Hey, September 22nd, I believe, is Hell's commitment date. We'd love to have you at Longview. Love to have you on the set for it. So you let us know. We'd love to have you there.
Let's talk about it, man.
All right, brother. Man, appreciate your time. Thanks for being on, and keep doing what you're doing, brother. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for having me.